She was lost in a blizzard for 2 days. The rancher found her praying in his barn. The blizzard arrived like a living thing, a roaring wall of ice and wind that consumed everything in its path, erasing roads, fences, and even the horizon itself, turning the world into a blinding white void where nothing seemed real. And she walked through it with a desperation born of fear and sheer will, her boots sinking into drifts taller than her knees, her fingers numb, her cheeks stinging with frostbite, every breath sharp and burning, her heart pounding with exhaustion. But still she moved because stopping meant surrender, and surrender meant death. And even though her mind screamed for her to give up, her soul refused to accept that the world had ended for her. She had been traveling to escape a life that had broken her, leaving nothing behind but pain and memories too heavy to carry, hoping to find work, safety, or even just a place to rest. But the storm had arrived without warning, cutting her off from everything familiar, isolating her in a frozen hell where each step forward felt like a mile, and every ounce of strength was being stripped away by the wind, the cold, and the unrelenting white emptiness around her. And after nearly 48 hours, her body was failing, her legs trembling, her lungs aching, and her prayers had turned from hope to pure survival. Whispered words she barely remembered from childhood, a plea for any mercy, for any sign that she would see the next sunrise. Then, by some miracle of fate or perhaps divine design, her hand struck something solid, rough and wooden, and she collapsed forward into a pile of straw, the impact jolting her senses but also offering a moment of relief, a pause in the endless chaos, as she instinctively knelt there, hands clasped, murmuring prayers not for riches, not for glory but for warmth, for forgiveness, for the bare chance to continue living, unaware that the barn she had stumbled into belonged to a man who had learned long ago that storms take more than they give, a man whose instincts were finely tuned to the dangers of the plains, a man who had survived loss and loneliness, and whose life had become a careful balance of work, silence, and observation. Miles away, that rancher rode home through towering drifts on a horse struggling against the white fury, feeling a gnawing anxiety in his chest that told him something was wrong even before he saw it. The barn door shifted slightly against the storm, letting a single line of cold light cut through the darkness. And when he stepped inside with his lantern raised, flickering against the shadows, his eyes fell on her, a young woman, collapsed in the straw, half covered in snow, dark hair streaked with ice, hands pressed together as if holding on to life itself, lips moving silently in prayer. And for a moment he froze, unable to believe his eyes, wondering if exhaustion and isolation had finally played tricks on him, until she swayed and almost fell forward, and he moved without thinking, catching her in his arms just in time, feeling the terrifying cold of her body, the lightness of someone nearly gone, and in that instant, something inside him that had long been closed off, hardened by grief, loneliness, and years of guarding himself, shattered, releasing a torrent of care, fear, and urgency that he hadn't realized he still possessed. And he wrapped her in his coat, murmuring reassurances into the quiet barn, promising that she was safe, that she would not die here, not tonight, not while he could prevent it. And for the first time in years he felt the fragile, terrifying hope that comes when another life depends entirely on your own strength and courage. He carried her to a corner of the barn, setting her gently on a pile of straw, brushing snow from her hair and face, checking her pulse and breathing, and noting the frostbite creeping along her fingers, her lips pale and cracked, the trembling in her limbs, every detail telling him she had been pushed to the brink of death. And yet, despite the exhaustion and terror, there was something in her eyes that caught his attention, something defiant, something alive, even in the face of the storm that had claimed so many. And as he fed her warm broth, wrapped her in extra blankets, and stayed awake through the night, keeping the lantern alight, he realized that the world had delivered her into his care for a reason. He did not yet understand that perhaps the storm had been cruel, but it had also been purposeful, leading her to this barn, to him, to survival. And he silently promised that no matter how harsh the winter, no matter how lonely the ranch, he would not let her go, would not let the wind, the cold, or fate itself take her from this moment. Through hours that stretched endlessly, he watched her chest rise and fall with uneven breaths, listened to her murmured prayers, and felt a connection form that transcended words, a bond forged in survival, fear, and the shared silence of a winter night where life and death hung by a fragile thread. And when she finally stirred, eyes fluttering open to see the lantern light dancing over his weathered face, her relief and disbelief mingling with gratitude. He simply nodded, offering only the calm assurance that she was no longer alone, that for the first time in days she could rest, and perhaps begin to hope. She was lost in a blizzard for 2 days. The rancher found her praying in his barn. Morning broke slowly, pale light filtering through cracks in the barn walls, turning the snow outside into a blinding white that made the warm lantern glow inside, seem like a fragile sanctuary. And she woke with a start, body aching, muscles stiff from hours of cold and strain, blinking against the harsh light and trying to piece together the fragments of memory, the blinding storm, the endless night, the prayers whispered into emptiness, and the sudden, terrifying sensation of being caught, held, rescued, her heart still racing with the fear that she had dreamed it all, that somehow she had imagined the barn, the blankets, the warm hands that had saved her life, until she focused on him, the rancher sitting quietly a few steps away, eyes trained on her with calm vigilance, the way a man watches over someone who is precious, someone who might vanish if he so much as looks away. And a surge of emotion hit her so sharply that she could barely speak, relief and gratitude choking her throat. And when she tried, only a broken whisper emerged, a wordless sound that conveyed everything she could not articulate. And he responded not with words at first, only a gentle nod, a small, reassuring smile that told her she was safe, that she had survived the storm, that he would not let her die now, that she could rest, breathe, and recover before facing the cold world outside. Hours passed as he tended to her, removing wet layers of clothing, drying frost from her hair, massaging circulation into her frozen fingers and toes, feeding her warm broth and water, his presence steady and unwavering, his voice calm but insistent when she tried to rise, telling her to wait, to let strength return, to let the cold and fear leave her body before she dared take another step. And slowly, painstakingly, her breathing steadied, color returned to her cheeks, and a fragile sense of security replaced the pervasive terror that had gripped her for 48 hours. A security she had never felt in years, not even in a home that was technically hers, because loss had taught her that safety was an illusion, that the world was cruel, and that survival often meant facing it alone. Yet here she was, alive, warm, and unafraid to some degree, because the rancher had kept her alive, and his unwavering dedication had reminded her that some people were capable of selfless courage, of acting purely to protect another life without expectation of reward. She told him in halting, shivering sentences, how she had gotten lost, how she had prayed in the barn, how the storm had seemed endless, how she thought she would never see the dawn again. And as she spoke, he listened, not interrupting, not judging, only nodding, absorbing each word, each quiver in her voice. And as she paused, exhausted, he finally spoke, sharing pieces of his own story, of a ranch and life built on resilience, of losses endured quietly, of nights spent alone wondering if he could continue, of winters survived when the world seemed intent on taking everything from him. And she realized that though they were strangers, their experiences of fear, loss, and perseverance were intertwined, as if fate had intended this meeting not by accident but by design, and a deep silent understanding formed between them, a bond neither words nor time could diminish. As days passed and the storm subsided, he guided her through the ranch, showing her the barn, the stables, the fences, and the rolling snow-covered fields, pointing out hazards, safe paths, and hidden spots of warmth and sunlight. And she began to feel a tentative sense of belonging, a sense that perhaps she could start anew here, not merely surviving, but living, breathing, rebuilding herself alongside someone who had demonstrated the quiet strength and honor she had long believed extinct. And in that growing warmth of companionship, a subtle spark of hope ignited, a hope that one day she might smile without thinking of loss, that she might trust again, that she might feel purpose beyond survival. By the end of Chapter 1, as she sat wrapped in blankets near the lantern, watching snowflakes settle gently outside the barn door, she understood that miracles do exist in the quiet moments, in the unassuming kindness of strangers, in the hands that lift you when you are near collapse. And as viewers, listeners, or readers experiencing this story, the reminder is clear. Hope, courage, and compassion can arrive in the harshest storms. And if this tale of survival and connection moves you, strengthens your belief in humanity, or touches your heart even slightly, subscribing to the channel ensures that you never miss stories where life, Love and faith intersect in the most extraordinary ways.